All right, so good evening, everyone. It's my real pleasure to introduce Ruthann Godollei. Ruthann is here on a Fulbright scholarship, so it's really exciting for us. She'll be here until April 30th? Yeah, so we'll be able to interact and work together for the entire term, which is terrific. Ruthann got her BFA at Indiana University in Bloomington and her MFA degree at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis. She is currently the DeWitt Wallace Professor of Art at Macalester College Art Department, which is a research position, so that's terrific. Ruthann has had a very active and exciting career. I think we first met in Belgium at a residency. I don't want to say how long ago. But in addition to being very active with residencies and that sort of thing, she has had an extensive exhibition record with international shows. I won't obviously go over all of them, but just maybe touch on a few to give you a flavor of her career. Some recent ones are multiple ones: Contemporary Perspectives in Printmaking, Hunterdon Art Museum, Clinton, New Jersey; Hellmouth, solo exhibition at La Warsaw Gallery, Macalester College, that was a solo exhibition; Nasty Women exhibition at Knockdown Center, New York; Political and Poetic 14th Print Triennale, Kuma Art Museum, Tallinn, Estonia. So that just gives you a sense of some of the things she's done. She also is in a number of very prestigious collections, including the National Art Museum, Tallinn, Estonia, Royal Museum of Fine Art, Antwerp, Belgium, Minneapolis Institute of Arts, Rutgers University, and the Denver Museum of Art, just to note a few. Again, she's here on a Canadian Fulbright, and it is wonderful to have you here, so please join me in welcoming you back.
This is my specialty. This is a screen print, and my work, sometime at the start of the first Gulf War, just became totally comprised of political and social commentary, directed towards what sociologists formally term culture and institutions. While I'm an omnivore in my own personal taste, I love looking at all kinds of art. I found out that it was my job to take a hard look at social problems and direct my efforts there. I love words, I love reading, I love history. I see images as texts whose meanings change as the context changes. And I also like keeping old machines alive, like bicycles, motorcycles, and my Washington overhead press. This is from 1885. It's an iron hand press built by the Cincinnati Type Machinery and Press Manufactory. And I saved it from the scrapper this November. It was literally on a cart going there from a vocational institution. So for this project, I threaded 100 feet of paper on a continuous roll through it in a rather unorthodox lockup to print commentary on the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearings. I don't know if you heard those, but the most recent appointee to the Supreme Court had a very serious allegation of sexual misconduct against him, and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford made the testimony before Congress at great personal, emotional expense, right? There's death threats against her and her family. They had to move, right? It was really hard to hear, and yet he was nominated anyway, dismissed in this kind of phraseology of he said, she said, we weren't there, we can't know, right? So I thought, no, it's not he said, she said, it's she said, and she said, and she said, and how many she's have to say before people believe women, right? We know this issue is not new. The Me Too movement is bringing it to the fore, but there are many historical moments where she says, and it's very hard for her to be believed. So I just decided to letterpress print this over and over and over and over again for a current show I'm in at Form and Content Gallery. This is it being installed. That's in Minneapolis. and I just ran it like a Greek frieze around the upper register, and anywhere you looked, you would say, oh, and more, and more, and more. And the idea that it's a chorus of voices and not just an individual, right? And that it's a social problem, not just one guy, right? I did do a he said print. And sometimes I have, this is a monotype with collagraph, and sometimes I have this interplay between an object that is real, that I sort of am drawing upon and using it as a metaphor, but other times the print makes me go look for the object, and lots of times in between. So I made this object, right? I call him Little Testy. I don't know if you heard how testy Kavanaugh was during his, like, how dare you interrogate me, right? So the thing is that I got this little Pinocchio in Naples, which is the home of the Pinocchio stories. I have a friend, Gianni Basso, who found in a dump the original wood blocks to Pinocchio, and he's reprinting them. But they sell these as little souvenirs all over town. And the thing is, his nose was only a little bit big, so I made it to the length I thought it should go, and I also gave him a MAGA hat, Make America Great Again hat. Right. Yeah. Back up. So there's these categories, you might say, of issues that my work addresses. You know, so that's a little taste of some feminist politics. I want to interject, but. And sometimes they're intersectional, right? So the environment, to me, also has feminist implications. This piece is called Infusion. I don't know if you heard about the issues in Flint, Michigan, a town that was largely dependent on the auto industry. Canada has many towns with stories like this. The auto industry starts to fold. The people in the town seeking to save money, the town overseers switched the drinking water of the city to the Flint River, which was more acidic, had more pollution in it, and it leached the lead out of the pipes into people's drinking water. This disproportionately, it was poisoning people literally, and it disproportionately affected children. Their lower body mass means they absorb heavy metals quicker, right? Pediatricians were reporting on this, and state health officials were suppressing the reports until it became a big crisis and made the news, right? So this is a sandblasted apothecary jar that I found, some adulterated water, right? And a label that I letterpressed reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland, right? This mirror world where everything upside down happens. People who should be taking care of you do not have your best interest at heart, right? And I thought sometimes when you make an object, it has more compelling presence, right? It can bring an issue more viscerally to the public. Sometimes a print can do that better, but I have the luxury of deciding, you know, what I would like to make. Would you drink that? Yeah. This is a screen print. It's called Warning or Indicator Species. It's a joke on taxonomy. It's obviously not a canary, right? But the monarch butterflies migrate from Mexico to Canada, actually, and they go through Minnesota on the way there. And they are dying in unprecedented numbers due to loss of habitat, for one, and for two, overuse of pesticides. So they're indicating, you know, if they're dying of overuse of pesticides, you know, what's getting into our food, for example. So I see them as the canary in the coal mine, right? Or in more drastic terms, the honeybee was just listed on the endangered species list just this week. And colony collapse here, also called collateral damage, refers not just to bees, which is the disorder that's killing the bees in large numbers, but it refers to us, right? No bees, no farms, no people. It's, you know, really quite drastic. And this piece, another screen print, I made for a print portfolio exchange project initiated by Native Americans, or as you would say here, First Nations peoples, the artists Marwin Begay, Emily Arthur, and John Hitchcock, called Train of Ink. This was a equitable exchange. Everybody in the portfolio made one to trade with everybody else in the portfolio, and it was a set of artists largely comprised of Native Americans. It's in response to the 19th century removal of the Plains, then called Indians, by a Hmong friend to tell me how you say it. They said, "That's very rude." And I said, "Yeah, I know, it is. And I'm sorry to have to ask you for it, you know? So don't say that to people." So I made the piece. I could have stormed City Hall with it, like Moses with some tablets, but instead I miniaturized a bunch of them. Laser etcher lets you do this, you know, you can cut into granite as much as you want. I made a bunch of miniature ones and I buried them all around Lino Lakes. I threw one into the golf course. I threw one in the drainage ditch outside of City Hall. I buried some at construction sites. And I figure whenever somebody digs up these artifacts, they're going to have to ask somebody who doesn't speak English to say, "What does this say?" Right? Yeah. So sometimes I see, especially political art, as speaking to history, not just to now, right? Or a combination of both, right? We can play long ball, and we can see and use our vision to see where things might lead, right? I made this about our hideous border fence with Mexico. I do not want a $5 billion wall. I want somebody to go down and hand out bolt cutters, right? I called this El Milagro, the miracle, which would be a hole in that fence, right? This piece made it through Hurricane Sandy. I sent it to a show called Democracy in a gallery in Chelsea in New York, and Hurricane Sandy came through and flooded all of Chelsea. But this was, luckily the show was on the second floor, and so I got it back, and I saw that as a good sign. And I thought I had to comment on our current president in the U.S., so I used my solo show as an opportunity to do what you might call a visual diatribe. This is the hell mouth, the mouth of the president as this medieval motif of the gate of hell through a gaping open maw. Only this time it's spewing instead of sucking in. And that's 75 continuous yards of all his tweets on a red satin ribbon that I ran through my press. And he's pulled by elephants because he doesn't get there alone, right? There's a whole set of people supporting him and dragging him around and making it possible for him to have a platform and stay in power, right? It's hollow. It has a crown of tiki torches, which refers to these neo-Nazis that marched in Charlottesville at the university there, and lit torches, and very reminiscent of the World War II Nazis, right? And there's bunting, right? There's bunting overhead. The bunting I see again as a chorus. I decided to take these orange pennant flags you see out, at circuses and also at used car lots, right? Good cross metaphors, and give them a little voice. So they all say "Welcome to our town," but they have different motifs underneath it. "We see many sides" refers to the president, in referring to that Charlottesville incident, as saying, "Oh, there was violence on the left too. There's many sides to this, right?" And I wanted to say, no, my dad was in World War II. He was paid to fight Nazis. There's not many sides to Nazis. There's like, in fact, if my dad didn't fight Nazis, he could have been taken out and shot, right? So when did the U.S. decide to, think it's okay to be a Nazi, right? It's very disturbing, and these are meant to be ironic, but also show that it's not one guy, right? That there's a support for this that's tacit and a real threat to democracy. You know the phrase, we shoot first and ask questions later, right? Yeah. Our town asks questions later. I didn't leave it all like this. There's a couple that I snuck in that have what I would call an authentic voice instead of ironic voice. This is in regards to the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017 in Puerto Rico, right? This says we're still without electricity, right? Because the U.S. treatment of its own island, right, was despicable in the wake of that, and still has been very neglectful in terms of helping to rebuild the infrastructure there. My Puerto Rican friends thought it was really funny. All right, so the rise of the right, the nationalism, the racism isn't just confined to the US, of course. It's an international problem, right? This nationalism tied to rabid racism. And I was very excited to see this graffiti when I went to Spain for the International Impact Conference. I curated a show there. Professor Caulfield was in it as well. And all over town, there were things like this that said, migrants welcome, racists get out. So there's solidarity across different cultures as well as domestically that I'm speaking to when I'm talking. We hear a lot of times, what's the use of political art, right? So what? I even had a critic one time say, well, we still have problems. What good is political art? We still have problems, right? Well, for one, it builds solidarity with other people, right? So the idea that somebody can feel less alone with it if they know somebody else is working on this issue. That if you know not all Americans are like that thing you see on the news, that might help, and it might help us talk, right? And then across history as another thing, I have seen political art, a Goya, for example, a Daumier, a Ketya Kollwitz, from another time, and said, I know what she's talking about, right? So I'm encouraged and emboldened by that, but also get the sense of there's more to be done. So this idea that I'm speaking to something bigger than myself and longer than myself, and with artwork that might be able to, with some amazing luck, last as long as some of those great artists. And then there's another thing, is I want a record that not everyone agreed, right? Even if I'm on the losing side right now, I think political art has an important function in leaving a record that somebody objected, because things turn. Think of people in South Africa with apartheid, right? Or think of, again, the Native Americans I'm talking to now who are doing incredible projects. The catalog for that rewriting show, if you get a chance to see it, is coming out of Dickinson College as a form of reparations, because that was a site of a boarding school. So the idea that that many generations later, some things can come around. Some things might be able to be healed. I want to be on the side that said, hey, I saw, So that's part of my motivation in doing this work. My students and I sometimes talk about projects that we might do. We try to illuminate issues and discuss tactics surrounding how art might address hate symbols or how to use art to combat racism. So this is a student-generated laser tortilla and pita project. Yeah. So we used our laser cutter to toast breads associated with immigrant communities, right? It was fun, it was delightful to pass out, it was easy, and it's not a normal use of a laser cutter, right? So, the honeybee as an immigrant, right, that crosses borders freely. And here's another project I did. I used students plus the printing community in my town for a Northern Spark project. Northern Spark is like your Nuit Blanche, right? You have these art festivals that go all night when there's finally some light, and we do too. So I proposed a public live printing giveaway project in St. Paul in 2017. The site I was given was the Little Mekong Southeast Asian District. I was one of many artists at this site, but this is the project I did. Their theme at the site was water and the environment. So I asked the public, tell us your word for water or a word about the environment. And letterpress printers, on command, did their best to try and print it for you. You, the public, got one to keep, and we kept one and put it up on a clothesline that just filled up over the night, right? So being somewhat prepared, I had diacritical marks, I had accents, we were asking the public for something, right? Please share a word or a thought with us. But the equitable exchange part, which is part of these ethics that I'm working on in terms of art, is you got something free to keep. And people were astonished. I heard that over and over again during the night, like, you don't want any money? It's like, nope, this is for you, for the exchange. Thank you for teaching us, right? The art part wasn't just the piece of paper. The art part was, as the night wore on, people waiting in line were saying, what's that language? What's that language? What does that word mean, right? And they would talk to each other like, what was grandma's word for that thing, right? We came up with 68 different languages. St. Paul, Minnesota does not seem very diverse at first glance, but it was astonishing how many languages we came up with, and gave away hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cards. It was really interesting project, right? We had people lining up to get cards, but also people lining up to talk about the cards that were printed. I knew we didn't have the Thai alphabet, for example. So I got a person who spoke Thai to let me carve a block ahead of time, and they chose the word for monsoon, right, the heavy rain. I knew we didn't have Arabic. So a poet gave me the Farsi calligraphy for deluge, right? And so we had those blocks ready and could print those for people that wanted them, right? I love this project. It excited me, it got me interested. I would love to do more projects like this. This is like kind of the start of the things I'm doing right now in terms of social practice art and public interaction in a way that doesn't just rip off the public, right? Yeah, or make them pay for something, yeah. Here's some people obviously enjoying getting a print, right? Also, the print equipment doesn't always come outside, so having some live printing is fun for people to watch, right? We just had little letterpress tabletop presses, and they were easy to operate, and you know, we'd let a kid ink their own block if they wanted, right? Yeah. It was totally fun. She's wearing an apron. This is Stephanie Hunder, one of the professors at Concordia College, and she's got the Farsi calligraphy on her apron. We all printed our aprons with words, because that was fun too. This is a different kind of bunting. The Super Bowl was held in Minnesota last year, and it was incredibly disruptive, right? The light rail, public transit, was completely overtaken for use by game day ticket holders only. I couldn't believe it was legal. Super Bowl tickets start, but lowest possible price is $3,000. You know, that's US. Yeah. The city also rounded up and cleared out the homeless. This is a common practice for major sporting events, right? In a kinder, gentler Minnesota version, they transported them free to a suburban homeless shelter, right? But it's criminal, right? I think the behaviors, you know, is to hide that there's any social problems at all. They wouldn't let people protest within this highly militarized perimeter outside the arena. It was quite appalling. So we thought, how can we get some protest into the perimeter? So I bought these cheesy pre-printed football party bunting things at a party store, and I, with some friends, printed on the back, you know, welcome to our town, we hid the homeless for the Super Bowl. And we rode the light rail till they made us get off at the secure perimeter. But we put all the bunting face down so that it looked like souvenirs. Right? We're leaving you souvenirs on all the seats, right? So we left them on our seats on the transit, and then we got off, and we knew that, you know, we didn't see anybody collecting anything. There was too much chaos. the next round of people got on, at least one round of people got those things, and hopefully gave them some pause, right? Yeah, a record that somebody objected. Oh, I wanted to back up for a second. The military presence for the Super Bowl was astonishing, right? The idea that they brought out tanks. They had tanks. No kidding. They put snipers inside the stadium, right? They're hidden, but you can like Google it online. There's like, Super Bowl snipers set up to like shoot if there's any trouble. It's like, I'm sure that would cause a lot of trouble too. Yeah. What our tax dollars pay for boggles me sometimes, including, proxy war by machines, right? Who could be held responsible for, war atrocities? A drone operator who wasn't even there, right? The more we entrust things to machines, the less culpability humans have, right? And that's quite concerning to me. And speaking of, culpability, Guantanamo is a detention facility, I would say a concentration camp in the bay in Cuba on a little plot of land the U.S. never gave up. And there are still 40 detainees there because they're not military. They're called enemy non-combatants, and they are not entitled to a trial. Trump just signed a perpetual keeping the place open order just in January this month. There's, it's a circus, but really, abusive mistreatment of people. Yeah. Goya actually identified in one of his prints enemy non-combatants caught in the crossfire between Wellington and Napoleon on the Spanish Peninsula, right? Householders caught with like kitchen knives and things got rounded up and shot because they were in the arena, right? So this is a long-running problem. Just a few more. This is a piece of caution tape for a crime scene I repurposed with screen print. There was a person in my neighborhood named Philando Castile. He was an African-American school lunch supervisor that the police, I don't know if you've heard about police shootings in America, they're serious. They are disproportionately affecting African-Americans. They are stopping people with racial profiling. I think there's some acknowledgement of this issue in Canada as well, right? This idea that you can just stop people because, really because racism, but on pretext that you're doing anti-crime work. Well, they shot into his car, right? And while he was still buckled into his seat, and his girlfriend and her baby were in the car at the time. She live tweeted it out on the internet, so it was a really seen millions of times by people. A horrible trauma for her and her family. So anyway, I thought one of the problems with this profiling is you don't see people as people, right? The state doesn't see people as people. So I took the back side of the crime scene tape and I put all the human attributes I could think of for Philando. So, lover, husband, brother, man, school lunch supervisor, beloved, there's a memorial at the site where he was killed, and this went there. His mother has collected all the art pieces and presented them to the Historical Society. So again, from the bad thing, some good things might come out. There's been, they fired the town is like a near north suburb of my town, and that he was driving in when he was shot. So they fired the police that were doing those patrols and brought in other police. So there's community dialogue going on about it. It shouldn't take somebody dead to do that. Right? This school where Philando was a lunch supervisor is down the street from my house. So the kids in my neighborhood had Mr. Philando as their lunch guy. This isn't like some remote issue to me, right? This traumatized people I know and me too, right? Or this piece, a white woman in this case, in her bathrobe, had called police and come out to meet the squad car, she knocked on the window. Her mistake, they fired through the window at her. The police in the U.S. are out of control, in my opinion, and really need a culture change. We resort to guns at large in the U.S. far too often, so that this thing that I started with, we ask questions later, it's like sometimes we don't ask them at all, So I'm trying to grapple with it myself, right? I am much more unlikely to call the police for help having had this happen to somebody. Right? And I'll leave you with this, because the treatment of service workers, in terms of dehumanizing them, is one of the ways people get away with not relating to people as humans, which lets you dehumanize them, which lets you, treat them as less than yourself. And this could be in terms of commercial culture, but it could also be in terms of domestic culture, right? So who does the dishes at your house? Yep. I want to leave you with the John Berger quote that I just found. John Berger, wonderful social art critic, committed to social justice, died rather recently, and left us with some wonderful words. So he says, "I can't tell you what art does and how it does it, but I know that often art has judged the judges, pleaded revenge to the innocent, and shown to the future what the past suffered, so that it has never been forgotten. I know too that the powerful fear art, whatever its form, when it does this, and that amongst the people such art sometimes runs like a rumor and a legend because it makes sense of what life's brutalities cannot. A sense that unites us, for it is inseparable from justice at last. Art, when it functions like this, becomes a meeting place of the invisible, the irreducible, the enduring, guts and honor." Cheers.